The Tuesday, June 12th, 2018 meeting of the Evanston Preservation Commission is called to order. It is 7:08 p.m. and we have a quorum. The first item of business is old business, and it's the application at 413 Grove Street. If you would step forward and introduce yourself and sign in.
Yes, good evening. I'm Jeff Clements, I'm the owner of the property at 413 Grove Street. We're proposing to put a 6-foot addition on the rear of the house. We were here last month, and the Commission had some suggestions in terms of improving the quality of the picture and the drawings so that you could see in better detail exactly what we're planning to do. This is a picture of the house in the upper right left-hand corner. Just below it, a picture of its setting on the alley between Hinman and Judson, and you can also see the location of the property here on the tax plat as well. This is the rear of the house as it is today from a couple of different angles. You can see the storm cellar entrance, the wooden stairs to the left, a little add-on porch where you can step in, and it's an unheated space with the original door just on the other side. No windows on the pantry side of it, and evidence of the chimney that used to go up. I guess that's the back of the house there. And a bit of a hodgepodge in terms of the overall look and feel of the house. The back of the house has storm windows that have that are slightly different than the actual, in that they have mullions on them. The original windows are there and are like the one on the top. You can see that just has the simple 2 panes. The plat shows the property. It's 40 feet by 132 feet, fairly narrow lot. The house, again, pretty much right on the property line along the alley. Garage to the rear, parking place behind. Our proposal is to add the area in black to the property. This will result in a minor variance from a zoning point of view, in increasing the coverage from 31% up to 34%. This is the foundation plan as it exists today on the left. The proposed plan, you can see the bump out. We have set the addition in a little bit from the existing line so that it's clearly demarcated in terms of the new space relative to the old. This is going to be a crawl space. We'll be eliminating the rear entrance to the basement. And floor plan itself, with the proposed addition of the extra space for the pantry, some extra space for a breakfast area, and more light on the northern exposure. Oh, and on this picture you can also see the rear entrance has been moved over to the left side of the west side of the property along the alley, and you'll see in the elevation in a minute how we've chosen to deal with the roof above the porch entrance there. So this shows that the rear porch door will have some overhang. This aligns perfectly with the existing overhang, and that avoids an additional variance from a zoning point of view, and maintains kind of a consistent distance relative to the property line. There is no post here. There is no extended roof over the porch, just the approximately two-thirds coverage that we get from the overhang of the roof as it's designed there. This shows the west elevation with the door on the left, on the bottom left of the screen going in, porch stairs going down. From the other side, we're not planning to put a window on the pantry on this side. Our neighbor's kitchen is right across from there, and this gives us a little more privacy in the morning than we would otherwise have. This is the revised elevation showing or the 3D drawing rather, showing the way the porch would look. And the rest of the details here, I don't know if you're interested in going through them again, but we're calling for Marvin windows that match the size and style of the existing rear kitchen windows. We're calling for, this shows an interior view of the kitchen and the tightness of the space. We have a small island, essentially 24-inch island going down the center now. And clearly a need for an opportunity for a more modern kitchen with some additional space. This would be the entrance, the rear window on the east side of the house that would be used for egress after the basement door, current basement door to the rear is eliminated. Proposing skylights that will, as you've seen in the drawings. I think that's pretty much it.
Thank you. Any questions? Going once, going twice? Are we ready to entertain a motion on this one? And the standards that apply are for construction, demolition, and then obviously there's the zoning variance.
And the zoning variance would be separate motion? Okay.
Correct, yeah.
I'll move that we approve a new construction and demolition for 413 Grove Street for the addition of a single-story, 6-foot addition to the rear of the home for a new kitchen in accordance with applicable standards for construction 1, 3, 7, 8, 10, and 12 through 15, and applicable standards for demolition 1 through 6.
Is there a second? Second. Ken? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any noes? Any abstentions? All right. Thank you.
We got the zoning.
Thank you very much.
Oh, I'm sorry. We need the zoning thing. I'm sorry. Go ahead. We need a motion for that.
Okay.
Sorry, spaced out here.
With respect to the project at 413 Grove, I'll move that we recommend a minor zoning variance in order to increase the lot coverage from 31.6% to 34.5% in accordance with zoning variance A and C.
Is there a second? Ken? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any noes? Any abstentions? Okay, no, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next, moving on to new business. The first item is the case at 2341 Pioneer Road. And if you can step up and introduce yourselves. And
Hi.
sign in if you have not already.
Hi, Carlos. How are you?
I want to show you, this is to move forward, backward, and this is to point.
Oh, great. So forward is to the right. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, great. Good evening. My name is Ann Ivan. I'm one of the owners of 2341 Pioneer Road. The impetus for our project is a remodel of the kitchen. And to undertake the project, we are proposing to modify the roof of a one-story porch and remove and add windows to the property. The plat of survey, which would remain the same as we are not adding anything. This is the west view of the house, and the best that I could get. But on the right side of the house is a one-story porch, and it would be raised 8 inches. It's at a slight pitch now. This is the west view of the house, and that part is an addition that was added in the late 80s, I believe, and there would be some modification. That door that you can see with the triangle has never been replaced, so it would be replaced in kind. And yeah. Also, this is another sliding door that has never been replaced and would also be replaced in kind. On this side, we are proposing the elimination of a current side door that would no longer serve any purpose. That was added also with the addition, and that is the view, the closest view you can get of the east side of the house. Again, from the alley a little further out. Yeah, again, you can see that we're right next to our neighbors, so. And this is from the north of Colfax. These are the existing floor plans, yes, of the interior work that we would be doing. Okay, so if you look, I know, okay, pointer. So I'm all confused because these windows, one of the current back doors would be removed, and these windows, which match the existing kitchen windows, would be added. If from the south, excuse me, just let me show you really quickly. They would match those windows right there that are on the south side of the house, so that they would match those. Oops. And then this is a bathroom window that we would like to add to a current powder room that has no window. And as you can see, they will match the living room windows that are existing on the original structure. On the south elevation, on the addition, we are proposing to remove the bottom windows, leaving the transom windows that match this side of the house right here. And then this one-story roof line, we're proposing to raise it 8 inches so that it matches the interior ceiling height of the rest of the house. It's at a slight pitch right now. It would make the roof, instead of slight pitched, it would make it flat, and we would add to the end shingles, slanted shingles that would match the rest of the roof, the existing other roof, the second-story roof. So that from all sight lines, you would see the shingles that match the existing roof. You could see there the proposed elevation and the slant that would come off with the shingles that would match the roof line. This is the existing west elevation, excuse me. And there you can see the proposed change. There's nothing to change on the north side, I believe. Again, this is the existing east. Here's the back door that we are proposing we remove. And it would be replaced by windows, similar windows to what exist on the other sides of the house. And then there's the addition of the bathroom powder room window to match the living room windows. Again, you can see the existing south elevation with the proposed removed windows there. So here's a 3D rendering of what we hope to accomplish. These are examples of the door and windows in kind that we would be replacing on the addition and in the 3 kitchen windows that we would be adding. I think that's pretty much everything.
Okay.
Thank you very
Questions?
much.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? No? Okay. Are we ready to entertain a motion on this one? Or first, before we proceed, is there anybody in the audience who wants to speak to this project? No? Okay. For this one, the applicable standards are for construction and demolition, or, pardon me, for alteration.
I move to issue a certificate of appropriateness for 2341 Pioneer Road for the proposed exterior modifications, including the existing kitchen roof line and door replacement, the existing family room door and window on the east elevation, and the windows on the south elevation. Applicable standards include alteration 1 through 10.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Robert, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Next is 1625 Judson Avenue. And if you can introduce yourselves and sign in, please.
My name is Sergei Safonov. I'm the architect on the project.
Mark Shapiro, I'm the owner of the project. Right?
All right, the proposed project is a wood deck with a trellis in the back of the existing house. Right, you can see the deck configuration shaded light gray. Right, this is the existing rear elevation and the side view, side elevation. There is an existing door to the back. Let's see. How do I do that?
To the right.
No, I want the laser. Here you go. Yeah, there is an existing door that will be reused to access the deck from the studio. There is also existing door from the kitchen, right?
Mudroom.
Mudroom, actually, yeah, mudroom. That will be reused. Right, existing side elevation. Okay, this is a proposed plan for the deck and the trellis. So the trellis is right there. Will be a stair to the backyard. Existing stair to the basement will remain. And there would be a secondary stair to get from the studio down to grade. And the new AC units will be located tucked behind the building. This is a side elevation with the stair next to the studio and the trellis. It will be constructed of wood, cedar for the trellis. Right, rear elevation, side. This is the view that we were asked to add roughly from the street. Actual line of sight is kind of difficult. You wouldn't see that far back because of the wooded,
Trees.
because of the trees. But that's pretty much what you would see from the street if you get a glimpse of that. All right. More views. And this is the view from, well, aerial from the back. The overhang is an existing, it will remain. So only the white, will be, that's the proposed, deck and the trellis. That's the view by the stair to the basement that will remain. That's the access from the studio in the front of the house. Well, it's rear elevation. So.
Okay. Questions? No? Okay. For this particular application, since there are no questions, is there anyone in the audience who would wish to speak to this particular application? No? Okay. For this, the standards for construction and for demolition apply. And if we could have a motion, Elliot?
I got it on, okay. I move that we issue a certificate of appropriateness for 1625 Judson for the construction of a wood porch with trellis along the south side yard and the east rear yard and removing the rear stair. Although I think we're replacing the rear stair, aren't we?
Yeah, we'll be replacing it.
As well. And that would be applicable standards for construction 1, 7, 8, 10, and 12 through 15, and the standards for demolition 1 through 6.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Robert? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah. Next is 1805 Wesley Avenue. And if you could sign in and introduce yourselves, please.
Hi, my name is Chris Lacerda. I'm with Redesign Architecture and Design Firm in Chicago, and this is my client, Matt Rappaport, owner of 1805 Wesley.
The right is forward, to the left
Okay.
is backward, and then the star on top.
The
is
star at the top,
right.
okay. Okay, so according to the plat of survey here, it says two-story residence, but there's actually a portion of the home which is only one story, which is on the back. So let's go to the next slide. In the hatch where it says second-story addition, that's our proposed structure. That is an existing only first-story addition, and again, it faces north to the north neighbor and east to the alley. The footprint of the addition is just a hair under 120 square feet, approximately 15 and a half feet on the north side and 7 feet 9 inches on the east. So some photos of the existing property. In context, our addition, again, because it faces north, is kind of a little sliver that you don't see too much from the street. The sidewalk, yes. Mostly visible would be the project from the alley and the neighbor to the north. I do want to point out that, so here is the first floor addition. There it is that you can see peeking over the fence from the alley. And it's there as you're looking kind of like from the street on Wesley. And our addition is right here. We're proposing to put right there. So I'm looking at some elevation views. Here is existing conditions. Here is the one-story addition, and it has a bit of a shed roof on the back. And on the first floor, here's, again, the first-story addition. And it was an old screened-in porch.
That's what we were told.
From a long, long time ago. And it may have had some windows in it. These are boarded over, so they're just kind of painted plywood at this point with, some old trim around it. Our proposed structure is, again, sitting right on top of the first floor footprint. That faces east, again, towards the alley, and this is the north neighboring view. And as part of this structure, we're asking for permission at this time to add a window on the first floor that would be in the kitchen, and clean up the siding condition, which is currently on the first floor. We're also asking to add a bank of new windows, taking out these two double hungs and adding a picture unit with 2 casements for egress that would emulate double hungs. So they would have a 2-inch wide mull, spread mull between. And then as an improvement to the first floor, this is kind of feeding off of the kitchen area, we'd like to propose to change the double hung windows here to French casements, since they lead right out to the rear deck. In floor plan, again, here is existing. There's nothing on the second floor. The kitchen is on the first floor. And this is our proposed addition on the second floor, which is master bath for a proper master suite. Doing this addition allows us to clean up some tight constraints on the existing second floor for bathrooms and a proper laundry. Again, here is probably the best photo to express the existing conditions, and here is the perspective view of our addition. We are proposing a flat roof for this behind a parapet. Otherwise, it gets a little gable end centric, and we're just trying to keep it quiet down. In terms of the windows, again, in the master bedroom, we're proposing the 3 windows, a picture unit in the middle, and casements to emulate double hungs flanking it for egress. And then as part of the addition proper would be this window here, which is right above a tub, so we're proposing just a picture unit there, and a small casement in the shower to let in some light. This is the window that we're proposing. It's the exact same size as the master bath below in the kitchen, as a casement unit for ease of operation. And then we have 2 of these that we're asking in the kitchen, which are French doors. The existing windows, there are a few original windows, which are wood windows, and they have very small divided lights. Those are present in the front of the house, facing the street. There's one. And then there are 2 gable ends, the highest part of the gable. They have this detail in it, so we're picking that up on the back gable. And then some window details. We're looking at the price of the Pella Architect series, and in comparison to the Marvin Architect series in terms of clad color match, and then because the existing windows, except for the original wood windows, are clad wood windows on the rest of the house.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Questions?
I have a question. Did you do any iterations or any modeling of, obviously, the gables in the back? Because I think the flat roof really takes away from the current profile of, you know, the roof line of what's there.
There were some studies of that very early on. I think perhaps it was not finding the right, you know, which gable are you going to choose, the facing north or facing east, and the height of those gables were challenging, not challenging in terms of construction, but challenging the height and the peak of the original gables. So to try to keep this a little understated, we're keeping it as flat.
I just had two quick questions. First, you had mentioned the neighbor a couple of times. Have you talked with that person about?
In fact, I have a kind of a signed letter from the neighbors going,
Okay.
who align with our house
Okay,
in support of the project.
all right. And if you could perhaps provide a copy of that to Carlos, that would be great. And then the other question that I had was specific to the two French casement doors. Are
Yes.
they appear, at least on the drawings, to be very tall and narrow. Could you talk a little bit about those?
Sure. I'll go to the this back elevation. So the first floor is very tall ceilings, and the existing windows and the datum line around there are 8 feet. So in order to preserve, in order to preserve trim detail, which is existing going across with all the cedar siding there, inserting an 8-foot-high French door in place of the existing double hung is kind of the quietest insertion that we can do.
Okay.
How wide are those doors? They
How
look
wide are
incredibly
they?
narrow in your
In the drawings, yeah.
drawings, not just this one.
Yeah, I think those are, I think those are 32, perhaps.
I have a question on that north elevation. Those are both casements,
This one above the tub, we're proposing that to be a picture unit.
if mine works. I hoped it did, but it's, yeah, there it is. Yeah, why, everything else is double hung? I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So it's really is kind of driving the function of this window right here in the kitchen, being above the kitchen window, and it's just ease of opening the window. Yes, we could do a double hung there. We thought for ease of opening and being 42 inches above the floor.
Well, you even mentioned, I think it was up here somewhere, I can't get this thing to work. There we go. Weren't you somewhere in here even having a casement that was going to look like a double hung?
That's true, yes.
So,
on the sides right
you
there and
know,
there.
if you're capable of doing it there. But that explained the first floor one. What's the reason for the second floor?
The
And it's
second
not
floor,
the same proportion either as any of these others.
well, this unit in the middle is the same size as both of these. This one does have the added small mullion detail, which is here, and then again on another gable end.
But that's a
in the
new
home.
window.
It is a new window.
Okay,
You're
so
correct.
I'm looking at the existing windows in those proportions.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just curious. And I think I want to reiterate the question about the flat roof. I mean, there was this discussion of gables, but I don't know if you needed gables. I'm just wondering what it could have been, you know, in terms of not having the flat roof, and we're missing out on not being able to see it. And it would be nice to know what the options were.
The other exploration was really looking at the other side of the house to do the addition instead of this side of the house, because once we started trying to put a gable on this side, what we ended up finding was that we couldn't accommodate the interior ceiling height without going very high on that gable. And the flat roof allows us to have, you know, kind of a minimum head height that accommodates the function of the closets on the interior.
Yeah, I think so too. Could have been some kind of a hip, Ken, I mean, going back from both sides.
Ken,
Can't hear
can
it.
you put your
Turn
mic, please?
Yeah.
You've maintained this kind of trim height on the addition, and it's sort of just a residue of the existing roof line of the one-story piece. And I don't know, once you've expanded that to 2 stories, that trim really has any meaning anymore. It just seems like it's making this kind of squared off addition look more awkward than it needs to.
Okay.
And that, I mean, I personally, I think I'd like to see another revision of this to kind of clean up that and study the window proportions and divisions a little more to bring it more in keeping with the rest of the house. I think
Sure.
right now they're just a little too randomly sized and randomly placed, and really study the roof line. I don't think the flat roof is going to be the right solution here, to be honest.
Other comments or observations? Go ahead,
Can I
Susie.
actually add to, when you're doing, I would agree with Ken that I think it needs to have a little bit more development. I think also too, looking at how you're going to detail the eave at the roof line, and I mean right here, I'd like to see more information just on how the top of that works, and if you do end up having a sloped roof, how all that works in proportion to the existing eaves. And they seem to have a nice overhang, so
Okay.
how all that looks would be nice
Yeah.
to see that detail as well.
Sure
Yeah,
thing.
the joinery part of it, I think, is going to be really important. So, with that, what I'm hearing from everyone is that we would like to take a look at this again next month.
Okay.
So you can talk with Carlos about the deadlines and whatever specific to that. And in the meantime, if we can have a motion to continue this one to July 10th.
I move that we continue 1805 Wesley to our next meeting, July the 10th.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Signify by saying aye. And
Aye.
raise your hand, too. You can raise your hand. Any abstention, or any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. See you next month. Thanks.
See you next month. Next is 2215 Norrington. And if you can sign in and introduce yourselves.
I don't think you need to. Maybe later if you talk. Hi. I'm Paul Janicki with Paul Janicki Architects, and this is 2215 Norrington. This house was actually at one time where the Norrington Hotel was, fittingly enough, and it was moved sometime around early 20th century. And if you could flip through some of the photos. Carl, so am I doing that?
You are.
Oh, modern.
You're running it,
Woohoo.
Paul.
This is the pointer, right?
Yeah, to the right, to the right.
One to the left and to the right.
Here?
Yeah,
On the same.
On the same thing.
on the same
really?
thing. Yeah,
Okay, sorry.
there you go.
But so it's stucco, sort of a, we'll call it a craftsman, with half timbering, gable ends, 3 dormers, stucco top, brick bottom, pretty standard. As you see the porch on the street side, they've put in some double hung windows at one time. We don't know when. That's one of the elements we want to take out, take those rosettes, double hungs out, and put the screens back in. As you travel around the house, you'll see at some point after the house was moved, an addition was put on the back. that I guess you might call sort of somewhat prairie-ish, I guess. It was all stucco, had no brick base, had different windows, had casements, not double hungs. It's just sort of a real different animal. I have a growing family who was looking to add more space. The house just doesn't have now a mudroom, family room, a kitchen that's usable. The kitchen now is like, 10 by 8 or something like that. So these are the basic floor plans, and this is what we existing is on the left. You can see the mudroom on the bottom right, and then the addition. So it's twofold, right? We're asking permission to demolish the addition that was done at some point in the probably 1910s, and replace it with another addition that is takes the entire breadth of the rear elevation. That becomes family room, kitchen. The rest of the house remains more or less unchanged. Upstairs, we've got a master bedroom and closets and baths that we need badly. Attic does not change. Roof line does not really change, except you get these two new gable end forms coming in and sliding underneath that dormer so that we don't lose any dormers, which is what we're going to do. You can see the existing elevation on the left from the east with a strange little porch addition that was also sort of an addition after the fact on the far left side. And on the right, you see the so-called Prairie School piece. Our proposal is on the right. Again, we're taking the same brick around. We're setting the addition inside the width of the existing house so we get a reveal, so we kind of see where the old and the new started. The two gables slide past the dormer. There's half timbering and stucco, just like there is on the rest of the house. On the side, we have the porch. You'll see the double hung windows facing north, but those are the two ones we want to go back to screens on. And on the far left side, you see the master bedroom with the double hungs that match the house, and then some casements that sort of match other details on the house that are high windows, clerestory windows in the kitchen, a rear stair stoop, which is made of the same brick with iron railings. Again, you see the same detail of the brick plinth with the steel railings on the mudroom elevation on the right, which is the change, and there's a stair that goes down to the basement that you also see railings for just to the left of that. The front elevation, again, is simply taking the double hung windows out and returning it to a screen porch. Actually, we looked closer at the porch recently, and we realized there's a drain for the porch that's integral with the old brick. So obviously the porch was wet at one point and had a drain, so it was never enclosed originally. That's our feeling. I think that's it.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Any
Sure.
questions? No?
Could you pause
Yeah.
right there on the rendering? Just one question. Could you clarify what's happening in the middle at the ground floor? I can't quite tell from this versus
The middle of the ground floor is a French door. And then the windows to the right. I'm sorry, Ken, did you mean the second floor or the first floor? Yeah, the second floor is, we wanted to push it back to express the gable ends so that they just weren't all one monolithic thing, and you can get a shadow. And then it gives a chance for the gable roofs to kind of stop and return back. That was kind of the big idea.
What's happening on that roof above that door?
Yeah.
Just a little copper, little wash.
I like that.
Okay.
Just this
Maybe it's that
copper-
better. See, no, it's not much of a better view there, but you can kind of get
How
it.
deep is that?
The addition.
No, the...
Oh, the little roof?
Above the door there.
I think it's, I don't know offhand. I think it's like foot and a half, 2 feet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that a flat roof or is that slope?
It's sort of a sloping wash kind of copper.
So you come to the back door and water's coming
It
down.
just peep
on
comes
your
right down when you walk out. Sorry, guys.
You better tell
Look
them
at
that
sometimes
now.
art has to trump utility.
Oh, okay. All right.
You have, on your elevation drawing, you don't have that window above that door. I'm assuming the rendering is the one that's showing the correct configuration, correct?
They're fired, that person.
I mean, you'd like to have the window, correct?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Sorry. I think the rendering trumps.
Yeah.
Sorry for the inconsistency.
No, just confirming. Any final questions? Are we ready to entertain a motion? And for this one, the standards for construction and demolition apply. Oh, before we do that, is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak to this one? Nope. Okay.
I'll do it.
All right, Elliot?
Yeah, I guess I don't know why I said I'd do it. I move that we issue a certificate of appropriateness for 2215 Norrington for removing the existing two-story addition on the east side of the house and adding a new two-story addition to that same side of the house. And I will say, including the window that's shown on the rendering as opposed to the elevations, so that we have it down pat, Paul. And that would be applicable standards for construction 1, 3, 5, 7, 8, 10, 12, 13, 14, and 15, and standards 1 through 5 for demolition.
1 through 6, actually.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, I've got a revised version, sorry. 1 through 6.
Okay,
For
second,
demolition.
Mark. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Is that the only one that changed? I'll throw this one. That's the one you sent.
Yeah. Next is 90 Kedzie Street.
Don't mind, I got some information for you.
If you can sign in and introduce
Already
yourself.
signed in. So
Okay.
my name is Matt Rogers. I am a zoning consultant working with the owners of 9092 Kedzie. And since we're handing out little papers, I also have something I would like to give to the commission.
Okay.
I'll address this when we get to it, but this does also help address some of the neighbors' concerns that have been voiced to staff. And when we get to that, I will go ahead and address that. The particular property we're looking at is two lots that are held in common ownership, and we are seeking to place a 6-foot fence around the property and then offer landscaping to help screen the property from the street. We have two different plans for this because we're currently seeking a vacation of some of the right-of-way from the city of Evanston. This particular property sits about 18 feet back from the sidewalk which creates a very large, odd area in front. There also is a little fence at the top, which currently exists there, and my little
Is the front, is the star?
star, that's why. Right along this line right here, there is an existing 6-foot fence that exists and goes up over the riprap rock on the lakefront as well. And our hope is that we will be able to tie into that existing 6-foot fence area in order to create more of a front yard. Without that space, the front porch sits about 9 feet from the property line, and we don't want to necessarily crowd the front porch. And in talks with the city, this is land that is not being used by anyone. It has been kind of a de facto front yard for this property. So we have made a proposal to go ahead and try to purchase that from the city. We've presented 2 plans to zoning because one includes the vacation, one does not, but everything else around the property is the same. I've included some photos of the existing property. This is that existing fence that I was talking about, which also has a lot of planting behind it. And it is on a higher plane when you look at the elevation, or when you look at the property straight on. This is the side lot, which is currently empty. 6 years ago or so, there used to be a home there, which has since been torn down. And you can sort of see there still was, this was where the curb cut was for the old property. You can see the little depression there. Looking on around the property, the entire east front borders the lake and has the riprap that runs along the length of it, so there's no true direct beach access to the property. But there is instead a boat lift, which is used to be able to put boats and jet skis into the water at that point. Also unique to the property is we do have a 5-foot easement that runs across the back of the property, which is shown on the plat of survey here. And we are observing that 5-foot setback, or that 5-foot easement that is used by one of the neighboring homeowners to grant them access to the lake. It's labeled as a public utility easement, but we can't find any record of there being public utilities in that area. And I do know that the neighboring owner at 741 does have an easement for that to be able to access the lake. So we are putting our fence on the north side of that easement. This is a rendering of what we're looking to do for the property. Obviously, this is the lake side, and putting a masonry pier at corners, and then creating a wrought iron fence for the space in between, and additionally creating a 1-foot wall at the base of that entire front of the property underneath. So it'll be a 1-foot wall with a 5-foot wrought iron fence, whereas the rest of the property would be a 6-foot wrought iron fence. We've also just done this to sort of show how the landscaping would help obscure the fence. We're planting in front and behind along the street side in order to try to make the fence disappear as much as it can into the landscaping, thereby softening the effect of the fence on the people who pass by. This is a sample of a fence that we would be using as a model. We have not actually developed the fence as of yet because we're kind of waiting to find out whether we get the land from the city or not, and where we place the property, because there may be some change to that depending on how close it sits to the house. But it is a proposal that includes a pier system. There will be a gate for the driveway. And then this is the part I was talking about where we would have masonry underneath a wrought iron fence with the pier next to it. We feel this is an appropriate type of fence to be placed in the neighborhood. The fact that this is at the end of a cul-de-sac, a 6-foot fence is not necessarily something that we feel will be overly imposing, as well as the fact that we would be hiding it among the landscaping. The piece of paper that I handed out to you, I know that the neighbors at 741 and 747 Sheridan Road have expressed concerns about their sight lines of the lake. Those pictures I took this morning, standing at the lake, pretty close to the lake, which shows their two houses, the back of their two houses, and what you can see. The row of bushes that you see that kind of separate the two properties are actually 6 feet high. So that would be representative of the height of the fence. And our goal really is not to screen the backyard as much as it is to screen the front yard. We want to go with about an 8-foot to 10-foot hedgerow for the front, because that prevents people from being able to see over it and through it. And once we develop a true landscape plan for the rest of the property, obviously that's one of the reasons we've not talked to the owners yet, is because until we decide exactly what we're doing there, we want to make sure that we don't have a great impact on their views of the lake, but we also want to make sure that our neighbors that our property owners do have some privacy in their backyard.
Thank you. Questions?
Yeah, I guess I want to start, I don't understand these photos. I mean, they seem to be the same photo, one above the other on either side, but what are we actually looking at here? And what are
What we're looking at is where the neighboring properties have windows and where those are in placement as to where the lake is. The home at 741 actually has a large window on the second story and the third story. There are two large windows there. And the first floor is actually a garage. From the images that I can see, I have not actually walked onto their property. But what that does is it shows that they are elevated above us. They actually sit on a higher plane than we do. And so that we are not going to be impeding views of the lake along that line. Obviously, we are not going to do any landscaping along the lakefront itself, because that would impede our views of the lake.
So is this 90 Kedzie in the foreground?
That's 90 Kedzie in the foreground, standing at the lake. So those pictures...
You have a site plan?
Yeah. So those pictures are taken from approximately right in this area here, looking this way.
Okay, and where on that plan are the fences going?
So the fence will actually go all the way around the property. Actually, this one's a little better.
And even on the lake?
Even along the lakefront.
6 foot tall?
Probably be 4 foot tall. The concern that we have, is that...
Sir, you'll have a chance to speak, and we'll need to have you sign in if you would. Okay.
So if I'm not mistaken, when I look at this photo, this is the 741
Yes.
side. Probably doesn't matter. What you're not seeing on either of these is the proposed fence.
But what you are seeing on those, if I can approach, because I can point to it easier for you, I don't have, I'm sorry, I don't have
Show
one.
me the 6-foot-high hedge, I think.
So this hedge here is the 6-foot-high hedge. It's actually just over 6 feet.
But is that true of the 747 side? Or that's not as tall?
747 actually has altering heights of vegetation along their property line.
But the hedges can be pruned, the hedges can die, the hedges can be replaced, removed, etc.
Correct.
Your fence is a much more permanent.
It is a much more permanent structure, but it is a wrought iron fence which is easily seen through. It is in a side yard, which is a 6-foot fence is appropriate for most side yards in the city of Evanston. Zoning board, anytime there were cases where we heard those sorts of cases, we approved those typically, if they even made it that far, because usually those are a staff decision.
I had a quick question. You had mentioned something early on about some sort of ownership of a certain part of that parcel.
Correct.
If you could clarify that,
Sure.
please. I didn't really understand.
So currently our property line runs right along this line here. So the shaded gray area is an area that we are seeking to have vacated by the city. It's in the public right-of-way. It is land that is a de facto front yard for this property because of an existing fence that sits there. So in our talks with Public Works, they are amenable to us approaching them about that. It's basically a negotiation over the price of that land.
And the fence would go around that?
The fence would follow the front of the property line.
I guess my question is if you don't have control of that parcel.
That's why we're seeking control of that parcel.
I
If we do
understand
not
that,
get
but
it-
why, I guess my question is if you don't control that parcel, why would we approve a fence around that parcel right now?
I mean, because we're kind of at a chicken and egg situation here.
Okay.
We have approached the city about this. The city is very open to selling the land to us. We are in a situation where we want to purchase the land, but we're kind of at a situation where if no one will approve a 6-foot fence for us in the front yard, that land is not as important to us because the front yard suddenly becomes a much more encroaching upon the house front yard. And if we were to put a 6-foot fence here with vegetation directly across it, it's literally at the front porch. So it's not something that is, we would have to refigure our plan as to what we do along here. We'd probably still seek a 6-foot fence, but we may change what we do behind said 6-foot fence.
Could you show on the survey where the existing piece of the fence is now?
Sure. It's actually right up here. You can see it. It's very faint. It goes up over the rock and along here. So it's this little line right up here.
So the fence, if you get the property, is already
That
around it.
previous drawing, I think.
Yeah, if you want to go back.
The grade in.
Yeah.
So basically, this fence exists as is.
And that's
there.
That's just the city, part of the city's property.
Part of the city's property. That fence is out there. There's a gate right here. And what we would seek to do is just make that fence, we would put piers at the end of that fence, close in the gate that's there. The gate was there because at the time the house stood on this property, you couldn't get between the houses with anything. So bringing in boats and jet skis, that sort of stuff all came through this side of the property.
I'm sorry, could you show exactly what part is currently covered by the fence?
So right here is that corner of the fence. You move along the line and up over the rock.
Okay, so all you're doing would be extending it down to the existing.
So we would be bringing it from here down to here,
Okay.
and from here with a cutback for driveway.
Okay.
This is obviously a zoning variance to have the 6-foot tall fence.
Correct.
I'm not super familiar with the zoning code, but which portions of this 6-foot tall fence would be permitted without a variance? And
So basically, a
what's the variance
6-foot
cover?
fence is permitted in side and backyards.
Okay.
So the facade of the building is what determines where your front yard is. So anything basically from here forward is considered front yard.
Okay.
Evanston has an ordinance. The ordinance says that the fences must be set back 3 feet from the front yard or from the facade of the building. So that would bring us back to really, if you were to continue this line on out, that's about where we would be. On that side and on this side, we'd be starting somewhere in this area and moving across to there. And that's what would be permitted by right.
And you can have a fence in the front yard, but it just has to be shorter than 6 feet?
You cannot have a fence in a front yard unless you are on a Type 1 street. Kedzie is not a Type 1 street. Type 1 streets tend to be a little busier streets. So we are seeking the variation to bring the 6-foot fence into the front yard. Most of the time, they allow a 4-foot fence, but we're seeking a 6-foot fence for security reasons.
I have a question about the fence design, because at some point, we're going to be looking at that as well, or we are theoretically looking at it right now. And what you indicated, if we go back to that elevation, is that this is not necessarily what you're proposing I mean, that was your wording a few minutes ago.
This is what we're proposing with a potential tweak to it. I mean, it's not exactly the design of the fence, it is the style of the fence. And what we're seeking is basically a little permission here to go forward with this, because of the fact that again, this will change depending upon exactly where we have to place it on the property. There may be some tweaks to that fence.
I guess that
I don't
gets
know what
to.
we're approving.
Yeah, that gets to my concern is
Well,
that
I will
it
be
doesn't
here
seem
for
like,
a part of the meeting a little later that we'll talk about.
Well, but I guess my fundamental issue is this one, cooked yet? Because it seems like there are way too many what ifs. What if the city vacates the land and you can tie into their fence? What, you haven't necessarily completed a fence design.
Right,
and so I guess.
And where I'm
What Elliot's bringing up
Right.
is that, I'm not real comfortable with what we're approving on this one, frankly. So,
And where we're stuck is I need to get a variation to make sure I can build a front yard fence. That is dependent upon this body. So it's a bouncing back and forth as to they want a recommendation from this body, a certificate of appropriateness for me to move forward with my fence variation for zoning. My ability to whether or not I'm able to put a 6-foot fence in the front yard affects where I'm going to ask to put that fence in the front yard. That's why when we approach zoning, we gave zoning 2 different approaches, one with the vacation, one without the vacation.
But we're only seeing,
one of those.
No, you're not. You're seeing both of them. This is the proposal without the vacation. This portion of land here is not included in our fence plan. Our fence comes straight across the existing property line.
But I think we're also hearing, though, that the design that you're proposing is maybe not necessarily the final design.
Yeah.
So again, it kind of makes it difficult for us to approve something that you're then in essence
Right.
saying may not be exactly what you're building.
Could we just give a recommendation to zoning, and then
Yeah,
then
that was going to be my
and then-
question,
then
Scott, is
the
what should
applicant
be the
does-
next steps on that? And then we look at the design depending on whether or not the vacation happens or.
Right, I mean, that seems like the logical
Yeah,
sequence of.
that to me seems like the only thing we could potentially do tonight. What's your thought on that?
I think it would be within the purview of the Preservation Commission as the zoning ordinance is currently written and preservation rules are currently to make a recommendation on the zoning variance portion, the fence variance. If the commission wanted this item to return as far as the design, I think that would be something also that you could request
we would
there.
require that.
And I think
those
we're open to
details.
that as well.
Okay, because I think that's what we would like to take a look at, because I'll be honest with you, I'm not particularly comfortable with what I'm being asked to approve.
And I'm not particularly comfortable asking you for it, but it's the weirdness of the
Thank
rules
you.
that the city has.
Yeah, I get it, I understand.
well, I'm curious about something else. Is there a 4-foot option?
There is not a 4-foot option. We're not looking at a 4-foot option.
Because that's also theoretically possible across the front yard.
That is something that is
That's
theoretically
we didn't get
possible.
the zoning, therefore, here's what we're going to do in those areas where we can't build 6.
Yeah. Perhaps. So
Scott, do you have some thoughts on
He's not
that?
asking to do that project. That's somebody else's project.
Well, but we're already being asked to look at 2 options, even though,
He said he doesn't want to do
Okay.
a 4-foot fence. He said that very clearly.
you did say that you were doing a 4-foot fence along the lake.
That's something that we're looking into, yes.
So the 1.2
The idea-
plan
the problem
showed the
behind
6 foot.
the problem with the lake is that most people would not fence that area. This particular owner has 3 smaller children, and obviously having riprap rock right there is something that is very tempting to climb on. There are holes to dig into. They do also have some dogs that they don't want to get into those holes, that sort of stuff. So that is the idea behind putting a fence along that portion of the property.
Okay.
The only other question I have is
Yeah.
in some of the letters from the neighbors, they sort
Right.
of allude to this easement, and obviously the 5-foot utility, you show that on the drawing, and I think that's very understandable, but they also say that the easement requires that the view be unobstructed. Do you?
I'm very interested in talking to them about that because I am unaware, and everyone I've spoken with in land use is unaware of a sightline easement. I'm not saying that one can't exist.
They do exist. I don't know about Evanston.
Okay,
Yes,
okay.
there are.
All right.
I've had to
I
deal
feel like
with
we need to see
Yeah.
what
They
specifically
are
that
here, if
says.
I'm not mistaken. And we are doing what we can, like I said, to not impact their views. But we also feel that we have some level of ability to prevent, to provide some level of privacy for our own backyard.
I guess, yeah, and we kind of need to know what the wording of that
Right.
easement is and what it actually says.
Absolutely. Any more questions for Mr. Rogers? Because I think there were a couple of folks in the audience who wanted to speak to this one.
Yes.
Okay, these are. Oh, are you Alexis? I am. Okay, you want to step up? And if I could just ask you to introduce yourself.
Absolutely.
And give your address.
And thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. My name is Alexis Eiler. I am the owner of 741 Sheridan Road, which has been referenced as one of the neighbors impacted by these proposals. I don't have a whole lot new to add other than what is in the letter that I believe Mr. Ruiz has shared with all of you. But for anyone here who hasn't heard it yet, I tried to go through their application linearly. Other homes, and specifically the homes that are referenced, are on a Type 1 street, namely Sheridan Road, have 4-foot fences. Nobody in the area has a 6-foot fence, and the 4-foot fences predate the zoning change that I believe happened in 1999. A 6-foot fence, while I fully respect the new owners of 90 Kedie's desire for privacy, will impact views. The visual easement is part of this 5-foot utility easement that is on our property. It's dated April 14th, 1950. I am happy to provide copies of it. I don't have it here with me because we are only recent new owners of 741 Sheridan, but I'm happy to share it with the Preservation Commission. However, that has been in full force for 68 years. Exception was obtained by the Boyles, the previous owners, for the boat launch. But that's the only exception that's ever been granted. And that was with the previous owner, the Cook's permission. We have security concerns. The reason for so much of this seems to be the new owner's desire for privacy and safety. The implication is that people would be accessing their property potentially by trespassing across our property. We also have children and dogs, and I am interested to hear what the explanation is as far as, respect for the safety of my family. To their point about dogs, our neighborhood, this wonderful little subdivision, doesn't have any fences currently. And everyone has respected that. We moved in February. We've respected that. We have kids, we have dogs. We want them kept safe. We're right on Sheridan Road. We have not built a fence. We've put in electronic fencing for our dogs. It's worked. Nobody's run into the street. Frankly, I've lived on the Sheridan Road for 13 years prior to being in this house. Nobody's run into the street. My kids have been in this neighborhood within 2 blocks of where we live now for their entire lives. So I would like to be convinced more of the necessity for a 6-foot fence around this entire property. I think that kind of covers, other than what's additionally in my letter, the bulk of what I have to say on this. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Could you
questions?
provide the view easement? I think we.
Yeah, I have to. I'm working on getting the copy from the Cook County Recorder. But we have it in all the trust documents, but have to actually get the full verbiage from them. And the previous owners are also working on supplying all of their background information and history. I spent some time at the Evanston History Center today. It is clear in all of the real estate documents going back 68 plus years that this easement has been in full force.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any final questions or comments from the commission?
I'm wondering if we should ask the applicant to provide examples of other similar fences in the neighborhood, and do we think that would be a good idea?
I also, if I may, point out that, as you well know, there are a number of famous, prominent, wealthy people who potentially have security concerns. We have a very well-known author right up the block from us. He sits right on a park. He is not buried behind a fence. We have people all over the place who manage to engage in their community and be a part of it and not, put themselves behind a fortress. If you want to live in a gated community, move to Burridge. This is Evanston. I just think it violates the spirit of the community in which we live, of everything that is Evanston. We have a very special place where we are. And I would hate to see that so permanently destroyed.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Other observations? I'm sorry, sir, did you want to say?
Yes, I would like
if you
to
could,
make a comment.
If you could sign in and introduce yourself, please.
Yes, certainly. I am Pierre Durand.
Can you please sign over here?
I didn't know I had to sign. I'm sorry about that.
I've already cleared it. And your name too.
Yes. Here we go. All right, I do not know, ladies and gentlemen, whether you have ever heard of Howard Van Doren Shaw.
Yes.
Yes, he was a good architect. I am a Frenchman. I came to Evanston by accident. I became a student, and then we did University of Chicago, and I ended up owning this house at 747 Sheridan Road in 2000. So I've been living there for 18 years. And I had no backyard. So back around 2009, I was able to expand the backyard. So that because originally you had 741, 747 that were built together. And then during the Depression, the owner, Swigert, of the original lot where you have all these houses, had his children that were, overstaying their welcome. So they only managed to move houses from Michigan Street to Kedzie, and you had 90 Kedzie and 92 Kedzie. And then around 78, you had 94 Kedzie, and this house was not historical, and I was able to have it removed, and we have a bigger backyard. And the goal I had was basically to bring back the spirit of what Van Doren Shaw had in mind. The house that was inside was very, very damaged, and I've tried to bring back the sense of, and I'm always amazed by the amazing craftsmanship that Van Doren Shaw was dealing with. And to talk about the backyard is the sense of space. And with Terry Boyle, when we made the arrangement, he would remove 92 Kedzie, I would remove 94 Kedzie. It was always the understanding that we would have this wide open space. And here we are in a situation where suddenly I'm going to have a compound in my backyard, and someone who is fearful of, I don't know. But if he puts not only the fences, but the big bushes, there could be crazy people inside doing violence, and we will not know because the bushes will dampen the sound and all that. We are in Evanston. We are not in rolling meadows. And we have to adjust. Mm-hmm. Do you see my point of view?
Yes.
I think Van Doren Shaw would approve of that idea, to preserve that sense of proportion, that sense of grace. And if we start putting these permanent fences and all these tall bushes and all that, I think it's the beginning of the end of the neighborhood. And myself, I love that section of history of America around between 1900 to 1925. You had great architecture, I think in music, you had in paintings, you had Hopper, but you had George Bellows. You had really the expression of a real American culture that was authentic, that was not monkeying you.
Right.
I think Van der Show, Frank Lloyd Wright, all that was truly an expression of that.
Great,
And that's why I want to try to preserve this.
Great, thank you.
So I hope you take this into consideration.
Thank you very much. Comments, questions from the commission? Thoughts about next steps?
I actually have a question for you, Scott. I know we're talking about some of the memorandum later in this meeting today, and I think it somewhat references fences in relation to zoning recommendations. So I'm just curious how that affects this decision currently.
Sure. It does not affect this decision currently. The current zoning ordinance authorizes the Preservation Commission to make recommendations on variations, all types of variations.
I'm sorry to disturb you, but
Yes, make it very quick if you would.
it would be very quick. It's just that I find it astonishing that the person who used to be on the chair of the Board of Appeal of Zoning is the one doing the application for putting these tall fences and all that. And I believe I will use my attorneys because I think there's a little inbreed between the city of Evanston and the fellow trying to put the fences.
Okay.
And I want the city to be known that the city could get in trouble as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
This is just,
Yes.
we have resources.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So next steps. Scott, do you have any recommendations given kind of all we've heard?
It's up to the commission to make a recommendation on the zoning variance. That could either be made this evening if you feel you have the appropriate information to make that recommendation, or if you felt that there was additional information that you would like to see, this item could be continued to a future meeting. That recommendation, the zoning variance itself, when it gets to the decision-making body, the zoning administrator in this case, can be made to approve with conditions, or deny. So if you did want to make a recommendation, you could include in that recommendation any potential conditions if you felt that was appropriate.
Okay.
Can we just clarify what the variance is that we're asking to be the recommendation that we're being
They're
asked to make?
essentially listed in there.
Right, and so in summary, it's the location of the placement of the fence, the 6 feet portion of the fence, where the zoning ordinance requires it to be set back 3 feet from the front facade of the building. So the portion of the fence along the side and rear property lines, and so in this case, the east, west, and south property lines is allowed. The portion that is being requested for variation would be the portion along the north property line, and really anything in front of 3 feet behind the front facade of the building.
I'm sorry, so the backyard is a zoning variance?
No, a 6-foot fence is allowed in the rear yard and the side yard. So the only area where a variance is requested with this is in front of the house, and more precisely in front of 3 feet behind the front facade of the house.
Okay, so by Kedzie is the front of this house?
Correct. Yep.
Are there, how does the commission feel? Do we want to get additional information on this one? Do we want to continue this, or do we want to vote on the zoning variance recommendation tonight?
Well, how does that issue of that particular easement affect anything that we're speaking of?
It's at the opposite end of the property than the zoning variance.
Yeah, so
it
it
wouldn't
really
affect the zoning variance at all.
It doesn't at all, does it?
Yeah, right.
That's
And
what
I
I'm
don't
trying
think
to
we're. I
understand
think we're.
how that even applies.
I think we're dismissing the application for certificate of appropriateness for the fence itself, and we just agreed that
Yeah.
we're going to.
Okay.
We're going to
We're gonna
continue
comment.
that,
All right.
yeah.
We will continue that. Yeah.
Yeah. Or they'll, essentially, the condition will be is that they come back for approval on the fence is really what we're talking about,
So,
correct?
yeah, I guess I'd say I don't have any problem with them building a fence along Kedzie, and part of it's already there. I guess one question is, so part of the variance is to allow 6 feet rather than 4. And I don't know how we feel about that part of the variance.
That's why we vote.
Yeah. Good answer.
It's primary day, is that
Or,
it?
you know, or that's something that
That we
whoever chooses
amend.
to make a motion would have that as a condition.
But if it's a 4 foot, then they don't need a variance. Is that?
They still do.
They still do, because it's a
Yeah.
front yard, correct?
The front.
Any fencing in north of the line 3 feet behind the front facade of the house would require a variance at any particular height.
Okay, does someone want to make a motion here? And this would be the recommendation to zoning.
All right, well.
Go for it, Mark.
I'll make a recommendation that we approve a zoning variation for construction of a fence in the front yard and for the fence to be 6 feet instead of 4, in accordance with it's zoning variation A, B, and C.
And then do we want to add the condition that they come back to us for the design?
Well, the motion is not to approve the certificate of
Or
appropriateness.
it's to post
just
until
the-
they have a design, correct?
Right, and then we actually wouldn't be dealing with any of the issues
Right.
raised by citizens because they actually don't affect the portion along Kedzie, and so all those issues could still be resolved, and we would get the additional documentation to see what it says,
Right.
and could continue to consider the issues about views and the fence all around the property.
Right. Okay. Is there a second? Ken?
Second, so
Okay. All in favor of the recommendation on the zoning variance signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Nay.
One-
He's abstaining.
Okay.
So there would be one, right?
Mhm.
And then we'll have 5 nays.
6.
No, 5 nays and an abstention. He abstained. Robert?
Right. Okay.
And then do we need a motion to have it
I
to
don't
continue
think-
or?
I don't think we need to continue it. We'll just see the design when they propose it.
Okay.
Okay.
So just to be clear, this is a recommendation on the variation for the fence or variations so that the zoning administrator will make a decision based on the criteria, comments from citizens, and the commission's recommendation.
So what
Is that
we,
correct?
am I correct? What we have here is a non-recommendation to zoning, effectively, Scott?
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah,
the
failed
motion,
rec-
the
failed
motion in
recommendation.
favor failed.
Right.
The commission, if they'd like, could make an affirmative motion
No, that just.
to
yeah,
deny
vote it
the variation request. It's not
Oh.
necessary. Sometimes it's a little more clear that way, but also I think we understand the unless there are other or someone wanted to vote for a recommendation with a condition or something like that. Otherwise, I think we understand that the 5 opposed were not in favor of the variation and essentially recommending denial.
They'll understand what that means, the significance. Okay. Okay.
I'm just a little confused about what happens, though, to the, I mean, Dan, you said come back, but they can't come back unless we continue it, or they totally reapply?
Right. That was my error. When they assuming they have an application for a fence that they want us to take a look at, then they would come back. So
Okay, so you would ask that they,
it would be a separate sort of application.
Okay, so you would ask that they submit a new application?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're not tabling this, it's just sort of withdrawn.
It's when it comes back, yeah.
If the commission would like to clarify, that currently in the rules of the commission, fences can be acted on by staff. So that would typically be how it would work, unless there was additional direction either through the rules or through this body for review of the fence there.
I would vote that this comes back to commission.
I think we need a motion to say that we want this to come back. Is that what you're saying, Scott? Otherwise
if that's the intent, I think that would be clear. That would be the way to clarify it. Would be to do so in the form of a motion.
If that's the case.
But are you asking they still seek the zoning first, or?
Well, we don't know what's going to happen.
Well,
with zoning.
right. That's why I'm asking. Are you asking that they? I mean, it seems like you're saying you don't want to.
If zoning isn't approved, then the design has to reflect that, and if it gets approved, then the design can leverage that zoning variance.
Yeah.
Sounds logical.
Yeah.
So you're at just, I think it's still very confusing. So you're asking they go to zoning first. If they get the variance, then they can come back with a new.
With the actual design.
The actual design is consistent with whatever the zoning is.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great.
Yeah. What's been approved there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Madam Chair, if I could make a request that the matter be tabled until your next meeting. By that time, we should be able to have a decision on zoning and be able to get actual plans put together to give us time to talk with the neighbors, instead of making us go through a reapplication process on it.
Mm-hmm.
For the fence proper you're talking about?
Yes.
If that's something that you would like to continue it until that time, I have no issues with that. If you know that you'll have a ready application for us to take a look at.
Right. We should be able to get some decision from zoning by that point as to what they're going. That gives us an idea as to what direction we're moving.
That's fine. So why don't we just have a motion to table the application for the fence, for the actual approval of the fence design until July 10, if somebody wants to make that motion.
I move that we table the application for 90 Kedzie Street, specifically for the fence design, until the July 10th preservation meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
Susie? All in favor? Signify
Aye.
by saying aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next is 917 Edgemere Court.
More? Oh, you're just passing out paper like crazy tonight.
You've seen this before.
Oh, okay.
Should we start?
Yes, yeah. If you could go ahead, if you haven't signed in, please do so, and then if you could introduce yourselves.
Okay.
And that pertains to all of your speakers.
Hello, my name is Fred Wilson from Morganti Wilson Architects. If I'm winking at you, I've had some eye surgery, so not getting fresh or anything over here. We are working on 917 Edgemere Court. Sue and Adam Sabo are the owners. We have a 50 by approximately 330-foot lot. It's a very narrow site that is vacant currently right now. These are some images looking down the from the street looking down toward the lake. You can see it's a 50-foot wide lot, so it has a narrow characteristic to it. We are in the Lakeshore Historic District, which does have multiple sort of styles within this district. What I wanted to, Elliot, can I borrow the thing, the pointer? Is this the pointer here, right here?
The star button
Okay.
is.
What I wanted to point out is that the current site right here, these are the setback lines that are existing. The home that we're proposing is the dark shaded area is the two-story elements, and the one-story elements are the lighter shaded elements, which we also articulated on the other buildings that are in the neighborhood. What we're feeling is that the building that we're proposing here is as of right, so that we are not asking for any zoning variations to the project. The front entry, what we're trying to do is stagger the building, so the driveway and the garage is tucked back over here, so it's not as prominent on the front. The front entry is right in through here. This was a program requirement from the owners. They have two young children that we wanted to have a secure play area, play lot. It's a grass interior courtyard. It also breaks up the facade at that point. Oh, that's out of order. I'll come back to these. These are the facades, and what we, again, tried to do with this is the south facade. We tried to stagger the elevation so that it stepped down as it got to the center. This is the courtyard. The front, you can see that this is the portion that's pushed back. This is the one story, and then that area is pushed back behind a balcony. And then we're trying to create a series of solid and voids using the windows and the materials that are here, the stucco, the wood siding, and the stone, so that it's a kind of an innovative contemporary design that we're trying to utilize. We also wanted the building to read as an entire structure from the front, down the sides, along the back, and along the north side. This is the other view. This is the rear of the building. This is the north side, again, stepping it down and stepping it back. This area is where our air conditioning condensers are up on our roof, so we don't have them buzzing along on either of the neighbors' sides. They're up above, and we have sound attenuation screens up there. This is the context of the building. The building to the north of us and the buildings even further north up here are a little bit taller than us. This is 33.5 feet here. Just this main spine, that's a masonry element, runs down the building, is at the height, the 35-foot height, but the rest of it starts at 33.5 and steps down. We feel like we're trying to mediate between the shorter building to our right and the taller building up in the front. This gives you the streetscape. These buildings are all around 36 to 38 feet in height. We then kind of we're a little bit lower than the building to the north of us, and then it starts to step down as it goes further south. And the floor plans, I'll just jump back here. It's the garage is in the front, as I mentioned. The courtyard runs through. It's a little more innovative in terms of the way it lays out. The bedrooms are on the first floor, so it's a master suite with an office, in-home office, and then kids' bedrooms here. And then on the second floor, we have living space that runs along the back. So kitchen, family room, dining room is kind of more of an open plan. And then sort of a library and kind of game room and playroom along here. And then this shows you in the roof plan where those condensers are located up in the front, and then how the roof pitches come through. So I think that's any questions? Do you have any comments that we would like to add? Yeah, the materials are stone for the lower base here. So we have stone along the lower base here. We have wood siding that runs along, and then stucco panels. Again, the wood siding that runs along. The stone runs along into the back spine back in through here. These elements are stucco as well. So again, it's a kind of more of an interlocking kind of elements of materials to try to break up the facades. Do you have any questions?
Okay. Questions from the commissioners?
Yeah.
Go.
I'm waiting for somebody else. Nobody
So,
wants to say anything.
I mean,
Go ahead, Susie.
You want to go, Susan?
I'll go first.
Okay.
So I think we're all considering, obviously, the standard 14 of the innovative design standard. However, with that in mind, there are some questions, some concerns of mine at least, on clarity of the scale and the proportions in relation to the context, the site context around it. It'd be nice, too, to know the rendering, if there was a way to add some color so we can see how it relates to the buildings adjacent and the materials relate. You mentioned that there's stone and there's stucco, but, you know, what color are those elements and how do they relate to the area, the buildings adjacent? In my opinion, I think that we have had conversations on these types of designs before, successfully. I think that this design, I'm sure you have spent a lot of time doing it. I think that it needs to have some adjustments or modifications to the scale to reflect a little bit more of the character of the neighborhood. So that's just my opinion.
Okay. Elliot, you had some questions?
Yeah, I didn't know if Gary's trying to say something here
Okay.
before we keep going. Sure. So I'll wait.
Excuse me.
Sorry, Gary, I didn't see you.
That's okay. I blend in sometimes. Gary Shoemaker. I'm the Shoemaker Design Associates. I've been brought onto this project as a preservation consultant based on my experience and longevity with the city, or my work with this body as well. I wanted to address a couple of things that I think you just pointed to. In terms of materials, this house is dolomitic limestone. It is seam-faced. It is a very common material throughout Evanston and specifically in this neighborhood. So the use of traditional materials in a modern, or innovative as the standards now say, context we believe is very appropriate. We've walked up and down this block. We've walked around Lakeshore Boulevard, or Lakeshore Historic District. I know this district quite well, as I think you guys all do. The use of smooth-faced stucco is also a common material throughout Evanston, throughout this neighborhood. There are houses on this very block that make use of that material. The cedar siding, which is being used as a weathered material on this house, will create a very buff and easy, simple palette on this house. A lot of the homes that are stucco and they're light stone feature very similar palettes. So to answer your question in terms of colors and tones, this is a very neutral house. Fred and his team have worked very hard. One of the things that the client has asked very specifically is that this house be open, be airy, and be light. In order to address your comments about scale and proportion, we did spend a lot of time looking at the scale of the windows in this neighborhood. Almost every one of these houses in this neighborhood, very rightly, takes advantage of near full-height casement windows, vertical windows to accent the height of some of the more significant buildings. Fred's point is correct. Of the houses on this block, I think this is probably the fourth shortest building. It would be probably the only one on the block that doesn't feature a third floor, with the exception of maybe a couple of the 1960s, 1970s houses a bit further to the south. So in terms of scale, this house has done a great deal to stay below the average height. Many of these houses predate this ordinance or zoning. which now limits our maximum height to 35 feet. So in terms of proportion, we have spent a lot of time looking at that. I think as you walk up and down that neighborhood, you'll see that the proportion of the windows, vertical and horizontal, are common. A lot of the solariums, sunrooms, screen porches, and greenhouses feature very similar fenestration on them. So it's not an uncommon methodology to apply to a house of this scale. So
Are a lot of those elements on the front facades?
they are.
Because I know when I look across on the very nicely done diagram that you have of the east side, it's just a very strong statement of the proportions of the glass in relation to the.
It is. The glass is intentionally used as a banding element. Not uncommon. Again, if you look at the house, I believe, directly across the street and to the north by maybe one, there's a sunroom on that house that features 2 brick corners and a strip of glass all the way around it.
You don't have a picture of that?
We've all been to the site. We've all walked the neighborhood,
Right.
so we're familiar with that. There is an all-glass greenhouse across the street and down. It's not uncommon to see bands of glass. I think if you look also, even the 1960s and 1970s homes adjacent feature gangs of tall horizontal windows that have been used to break up these facades. But I think our intention here, I think Fred mentioned as well, is to use a combination of the glazing strips as well as the massing of the material volumes to define this as a more open and light structure. So, and
Elliot, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, Carlos, I'm not sure that you listed standards 1 through 16, and I'm really not sure why 12, 13, and 15.
There's 2 or 3 in there. I had the same one as
Several of them
Elliot.
shouldn't even apply.
But, yeah.
The new additions, archaeological resources, original quality, so I think
No, it was an oversight.
any motion shouldn't include it. But
Yeah.
I'd like to go through the standards. And can we go to the elevation? You just mentioned that street elevation. I think you should have
This
dug
elevation?
up. No, the one that shows the block. Because I think
Oh, the whole block.
you should have dredged out some of the old ones from last time, Fred, because they were even clearer. I mean, when we start out, the first standard is height, and the implication is visually compatible, et cetera. I won't read the whole thing. And this makes it look like they're all the same height or slightly lower, as you said. But that's really misleading because a lot of these roofs slope back. It's nice to take the ridge line and run a line across, but that's not really what you're going to see when you see it. So that notion of visually compatible, that's really not the case when you come across with something straight across with a relatively flat facade. And then we get into number 2, proportion of the facades, relationship of the width to the height, visually compatible with property structures, and so on, to which it's visually related. And I'm not seeing that here. I'm not quite sure. You can respond to it. I guess I'll go through it. Proportion of the openings is another one. You made the comment, I think it was Gary actually, about the windows being similar, but I'm looking at those long strip windows on this proposed facade, and I'm not really seeing that kind of window proportion. And this isn't the perfect drawing, but it's still good enough to make the point that I'm not seeing that at all. Now we get into rhythm of solids to voids in the facade. And again, those very large openings and the kind of rhythm that we get in everything starting at the left end and working its way southward. I'm just going through these things. Rhythm of spacing and structures on the street. That one's a little tricky. Rhythm of entrances. This is number 6. Entrances, porches. I'm not going to go into storefront. Relationship of entrances and other projections. There's a very different character to the kinds of entries we see on most of these other houses than we're seeing here. Relationship of materials and texture. That's really tricky because most of those seem to have a predominant material. And here we have, I don't remember how many materials you just described, but there were at least 5, 4 to 5. Cedar, stone, brick, stucco. And glass, and we're not going to get into your fascia materials and all the rest. So that seems a lot more than what I'm seeing there. Roof shapes, Well, what can I say? That's certainly number 8. Walls of continuity, one can always argue, what does that mean? There is some continuity when we look at the plan in terms of you've respected the setback. That was one of the things that was always an issue previously, how far you were going to the lake and so on. You've sort of squeezed it in, whether we're still there or not. Scale of structure. This is a very different scale than the others in many respects. I think it's, it comes off as a very different element than on most of the others. The directional expression of the facade, yours is very horizontal, but so is that Harry next door? Right? Yeah. Okay, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But I think, there is that horizontality there, but a lot of the others appear to be much more vertical than horizontal when we look at this elevation. And I think we have to respect the idea that innovative design is something, you mentioned it, so I think that's a separate issue. And I'll just stop there, but I'm looking at these criteria, and I'm just not finding that we've really met what are our, actually today is today the first day of the new standards? So, I'm just not seeing it here, and you can respond.
I'm going to disagree with, I think first of all, if you walk down this street, the houses are incredibly different from each other. It would be impossible to build new construction that was compatible with the majority of the houses. The 2 houses to the south are very modern looking, very beautiful ranch-style houses, which could be in a subdivision in Northfield. The house, there's several older, about half the houses on both sides of the street are older houses that are, a little more typical for Evanston. I don't know what the age is, but, more alike each other. The house that is 2 to the north is this far more massive Mediterranean house that I don't know how it got approved. It's far more massive than this one. It literally would be impossible to design a house that is compatible with the features of the surrounding houses. This is new construction. We've approved other new construction projects, realizing it's virtually impossible for new construction to match the historic neighborhood. And we certainly have not applied the standards to require only new construction that harkens back to make it look like older homes be approved. We approved recently another, much more modern home than this. So, I think the questions about whether particular features could be modified to be more compatible in scale, I think are very legitimate. But I think to turn down a house and the fact that it's different than the surrounding houses, which are incredibly different than each other, you would turn down every single house on that basis. And secondly, I think new construction is inherently going to look different than a 100-year-old house. And we've never required otherwise. And plus, these houses are all so dramatically different than each other in age, style, proportion, that it would be impossible to apply those standards. This is a block that's about half newer homes. So to say it doesn't look like the half of the houses that are historic homes, I think has no validity in terms of preservation.
I don't think it has to look like the other homes. I don't think that's the point. And I don't think that's the point of these standards.
Well, how can you match the roof lines if every house has a different roof line?
No, we're not. But it's not height of roof lines that we should be. That shouldn't be the criteria. There's still a character to those roofs.
But they're all dramatically different than each other.
But there's still.
There's no commonality between those houses.
What is the commonality in those roofs that you see looking across that elevation?
There is no commonality between the houses on the sides of it. So how could it have commonality with several of the houses if they're, dramatically different ages and styles already? There is no commonality there to start with. And it's a block of about half modern houses.
So, other observations, Ken?
I guess I'm more with Elliot. I think the material, the key things I think are the materiality, and I do think it's perhaps too busy compared to the more understated palette of materials that most of the houses have. Not to say you have to match exactly what's there, but something a little more toned down, perhaps on the front, is appropriate. I am concerned about the height. I do agree with Elliot that this presentation is somewhat misleading to show how high up the second floor of this new house is set relative to everything else on the block. It fits under the height only because your second floor ceiling is a flat roof and it's equal to the pitch of all the sloped roofs, which are capturing a third floor. So I do think that even though in this line drawing it looks similar in height, it would be perceived as much taller than everything else on the block. And I think the large windows overlooking the lake are fine, but I think something a bit more restrained facing the street is probably appropriate here.
I think one thing we need to keep in mind is that this lot in particular is, I think, pretty challenging, given it's the narrowest lot, I believe, on the block. So I think, everybody has to keep that in mind. The reason that it's, I think, shaped the way it is that maximizes the space they have. But it does sort of create this shipping container looking. I'm not an architect, so that's the best I can do. Sorry. But I appreciate it. I like it. I tend to fall in Elliot's camp a little bit here with some of it.
I think Ken made a good point, though, about the floor height, Ken. I wasn't even looking at it until I began looking at your point. That when you look at the second floor of the house to the north, and you realize where that floor line is, relatively speaking, and even that whole height, it is really a taller house that if it had, Mark, you don't have to put that other roof on it, but if you did, you'd suddenly realize it would be a 45-foot tall house.
Yeah.
So I think, it sort of solves the problem, but not in the way that we're looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, basically the second floor windowsills of the new house line up with most everybody else's.
Looks like almost the gutter line on some of those. And I agree with what was just said about, it is a difficult lot because of it. You're forced to go east-west rather than north-south. And most of these houses are really oriented, with the exception of that strange Spanish house that nobody knows how it ever got approved. But it preceded most of us here, so.
All of us here.
All of us, I guess, now.
And nobody that buys that lot wants a 1,000 square foot home on it.
Right. No. That's the problem.
Susie, go ahead.
So I think we've all appreciate the innovative design, and I think that that's within it's within the range of standard 14. So I think my request would be that you guys maybe relook at the proportion of the front facade. I agree with Ken that the rear facades are less of the concern, and we understand the size and the scale and that you need to maximize a lot. But my request would be that maybe it's looked at again for the front and the relationship to the adjacent properties in regards to materiality, color, and proportion. And I am no way saying that you can't have an innovative design. Obviously, I think that it's something that is welcome in Evanston in context, but I do think that it has to have relationship, and I think that this maybe needs to have a little bit more, be brought a little bit further to show that relationship to the context.
Any other comments?
Can we look at your front elevation, Fred? Well, we could stop there. Go back to the. Well, but on this one,
You wanna go to
actually,
this?
I'm sorry. It's
This
true
one?
here that stucco surround, if you want to call it, that's going on over the front entry, goes up and then comes across. It's better on the next slide. I mean,
This
it
one?
shows up and it shows up on everything I see. And this really, I'm not quite sure when we talk about relationship, and it's not a question of being innovative or not, but I'm not quite sure what it's an expression of here at all. I mean, are you expressing that there's this long, narrow band of house beyond it?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we were trying to do is that this spine right here runs through the house, so that that's what this element becomes, and then comes out the back. And then what we were looking at is that areas like this become a solid, and then that becomes a void. So we're trying to play off of that. And the idea was also to try to create a building that was whole, that was all one type of language, that if we were, I felt like where we were going down the other road was we kind of had almost like a billboard at the front, and then it sort of evolved into something different in the back. And we felt, as a purity or the architecture of a language, we felt that this was a more appropriate direction to head in terms of maintaining consistent style, so that it wasn't a confused language.
Well, maybe that's the problem, that there's, the combination of multiple materials, it's been pointed out, could it have been simplified in terms of that, and making it a much clearer statement. I mean, if you're saying, look, these are rectangles working their way back, do you need all of this embellishment? I mean, pretty soon, whatever, I always use the term grammar, and there's this language and there's a grammar, and I don't know what language we're speaking here anymore, because there's so much going on. It's like, we're going to do this little bit here, and I'm not sure where that comes from, because it's not part of this sort of, this could be early 20s modern.
I think we were trying to just break it up from being a monolithic mass, that we felt that we wanted to have some diversity, and we felt like it wasn't a heavily ornamented building, so we were doing it just with planes of material. So we felt, again, to be consistent with the language, we weren't relying on cornice lines and moldings and such. We felt it was more about composition and materiality, literally. Again, and I think if you start to, you can look at watering it down, but I don't know if it then just starts to become dull, so it's a matter of taste as well.
I think, one of the things, and you've only got that one rendering, and this is one of those times where, given all this solid void stuff, that even the simplest chipboard model, granted it would have lost some of this, but it would have helped a hell of a lot, because then a lot of the points you're trying to make would be a lot clearer. We're not reading, and I don't know if anybody is in this room, and some of us are architects and they're supposed to be able to read it. We're not really reading all of this sort of, void solids and all of that. You just don't read it here. And regardless of the dark lines, light lines, and whatever the AutoCAD generated here, it's not happening, and you can't really tell. And it's one of those times where you almost want to see it in the context of, even if nothing else, the building to the north and the south. Even if it was just a primitive facade of those buildings, we'd at least be able to understand what's going on. Because right now, I look at that top elevation and I'm like, I'm sorry to say, what the hell is that? But I will.
Well, what I think it gets back to is something that you had mentioned early on, and that the goal was really to achieve kind of an airy feel throughout that. And to me, this facade just doesn't conform with what you were trying to achieve with the rest of the design around the house. And I agree with everybody else in terms of looking at a modern design for this location. That's really not an issue, but I just don't think this particular facade necessarily reflects what else is going on. Yeah. So, with any other final questions, we had a few people in the audience who wanted to speak to this one. First is Harry Lawrence. There were 3 people who had signed up, actually.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
My name is Harry Lawrence. I live at 919 Edgemere Court, which is directly north of the applicant. How's everybody doing here tonight? They got the big house tonight here. we talked about this before, and I think Elliot brought it up just at the very end here, is the last time we were going through this exercise, the committee had instructed the applicants to do a 3D model. That was going back almost a year and a half, 2 years ago. And after that request was made, the applicant would table and table and table and table, and I don't think that ever came to fruition. Maybe it fell by the wayside, but I think that would be very instructive to see not only how it lines up with the rest, but the canyoning effect that it does to the house directly to the south of it and to the north of it, which is me, because of the 925 Spanish house. Now, in reference to Mark, where he states that the 925 Spanish house, how did it ever get approved? Believe it or not, this house would be covering, I mean, percentage-wise, as much land as the 925 house because of this only being 50 foot wide. So it would be like two mountains on either side of 919 and one mountain on the side of 911. You know, at the end, while we talked about that, about producing the 3D model and the relationship, these are both two landmarked homes that flank this house. 919 and 911 are both two landmarked homes. So take that into consideration. I don't know if the committee was aware of it or not, but right at the last, when we were supposed to have the last committee hearing on the application, I submitted to Carlos a neighborhood position statement that's about 48 pages, signed off by the entire Edgemere Court residency. And I provided to him with a flash drive. And do you remember that, Carlos? We had to talk to the previous zoning boss. But in any event, I have that still here today, and we would like to be afforded the opportunity to have our architect take a look at all this. So we have a reasonable way of looking at this. You know, we got, a little postcard in the mail with a 1-inch rendering, 5 days before this, and then we got to see the plans 3 days. So we really haven't had the amount of time that, we need, being this sensitive of an issue, to examine the plans. So
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is, where's my sheet here? Next.
Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt. Did you ever get that Did you ever get that position statement, Diane?
Yeah, so I think we did.
It's like a 48-page.
Yeah, I believe that we actually did. I think the issue is since this is a new
I
application.
agree, but we would like to have that opportunity to address that same statement to this application.
Let's see how things proceed
Sounds good.
tonight. Next is Pauline Sheehan.
Do I need to sign in somewhere? Or?
You already did,
That's
actually.
me.
And if you could introduce yourself and your address, please.
Hello. My name is Pauline Sheehan. I also am known as Pauline Curtitis, that I use professionally as an architect. I'm a licensed architect. And I also happen to live at 920 Edgemere Court, directly across the street from this house. So we always knew that something would be built there, and we have no objections to anything being built there. Certainly, the owners of that property have the right to build something. But my feeling is that as far as the renderings or drawings or modeling that we've been presented with, it's very difficult to get a sense of the massing of that house in relationship to the neighboring properties. And I think that as other people have mentioned tonight, being able to look at the massing in a little better way, given the capabilities that we have for 3D modeling and rendering, or a chipboard model, a little foam core or something, would really go a long way to giving a sense of the scale of this and its relationship to the neighbors. I have nothing against contemporary design, but I do feel that the scale and sensitivity to the other properties is out of line with the unique nature of this street as a commons, where it is like a little enclave in a way. So thank you very much
Thank
for your
you.
consideration.
Finally, Philip Criffield, and pardon me if I'm mispronouncing your name.
Yes, my name is Philip Criffield, and congratulations, you got it right. Very few get it right. My name is Philip Criffield. My wife and I own 911 Edgemere Court, immediately to the south of the subject property, and we also own 900 Edgemere Court right across the street, which just happens to be 40% of the historic landmark homes on Edgemere Court. I kind of feel like this is a deja vu all over again. We were here 2 years ago with a different plan. I think there were 3 separate presentations to this body, and all of which raised objections concerning massing, height, setback, and frankly, while we have a different plan here, it really doesn't meet those basic issues that were addressed, that we raised then. Setback. There is a race to the lake going on here. We as a neighborhood met with the Sabos and asked passionately that they align their property, the back setback, with the line across the back. And that was in response to a plan that pushed it out 15 to 20 feet with a cantilever. And we're seeing the same thing here. They've not met that objection. Height is a major, major issue. Our house at 911 is a 1.5-story house. A second floor is, I'm not an architect, so my vocabulary isn't good, but it's the eave of the roof is angled. And you can see it here. It's a 1.5-story house. And if we could look at the south elevation, please, of the proposal. How do we do that?
You have the clicker there.
Go the other way.
There we go.
Go one more.
Thank you. For all intents and purposes, this is a 2.5-story house because the basement comes up, at least by my view, 4 to 5 feet from the grade level. You then have 2 stories of what I understand to be 10 to 11-foot ceilings to take you up to 35 feet. Our house is 26 feet. It will dwarf our house. And we find that very troublesome. A third issue is the height of the house in relation to the back, where the objective of the applicant is to live on the second floor and have an expansive view of the lake. What they're going to take is an expansive view of our backyard, which is stealing our privacy. We don't care. We like our view of the lake, and we would like them to have a nice view of the lake, but not at the expense of our privacy. There's another issue, and that is the grade. There was, by the developer who originally took down the home that was there, they brought in an artificial landfill and raised the grade toward the back of the property by 3 feet. We can bring you in and show you the photographs. And so any
Unfortunately, that's outside of our purview. So
I'm just telling you the facts. I'm just giving you the facts. And so when they talk about height from where? That's the point. Is it the height from the back, where it's already been elevated 3 feet? Is it the height from the front, or is it the height from the street? I'd like to see any measurement of height back to the three-dimensional issue. I'd like to see the difference between the heights of the top of the peak of our house to the top of the peak over here. What is that difference going to be? We don't know. These drawings don't illustrate that. So at the end of the day, the other 2 owners have asked for time to take a look at this. I think we should have a time to take a look at this. We have an architect that we would like to bring in. We've only had 3 days' notice that she could not be here tonight. I personally don't speak your vocabulary, but I think that if we were given more time, we could present to you a full technical analysis of this situation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your service.
I also want to mention that Carlos received a letter from Michael Arrington, who lives at 929 Edgemere Court, opposed to this application, and also echoing similar comments to those of the other residents. Was there anyone else before the commission chats again here that wants to speak? Okay. Any final questions or comments for anyone? What I was hearing from folks, and you can tell me if this is the case, is that we would like to see this one again. Particularly some of the issues specifically to the facade. Gary, did you have something you wanted to say? Yeah. I think in general, what I'm hearing from the commissioners is that they would like to see this again, given some of the concerns specifically about the front facade issues.
Okay. Excuse me. I'd like to take just a moment to address a couple of things that came up here. Sure. Elliot, while I respect your comments about the roof slope, I've been on that side of the dais when we've had that conversation before. If you look at the way this property is sited, it was specifically pushed back and staggered so that it does terrace back. We believe, much like all the other properties, which offer generous front yards and clear, unobstructed views of these facades, this house does much the same by stepping back and tapering up. So our contention would be that from the street view, this would taper back, and it would appear, in fact, lower or at least the same height as the adjacent properties. So while I understand your position, I would disagree with how the house would be perceived in there. I understand the concerns of this body. However, we've worked long and hard with this client. Fred and his team have worked for a very long time to get this project to where it is. It has been reimagined several times. It has addressed a great number of these concerns. In terms of floor heights, if you look at the way this is structured, the parapet wall in that low section of the C is in fact the floor line. So your assertion that the floor line was that much higher is not accurate. It's a bit lower. That's fine, but the floor heights aren't as you had analyzed them from the larger elevation. Great care has been taken to keep this house proportionally in context and in alignment with these. However, the direction of the client to Fred and when we became involved is that they really do want a contemporary and innovative structure. They want what we have designed for them. While I understand the concerns of this, we believe that we've addressed each of the standards carefully. We've evaluated the community, we've evaluated the neighborhood, we've taken into consideration comments of at least 2 iterations of this body, because I think some of you are seeing this for the first time, if I'm not mistaken. So while we appreciate that.
I would like to clarify that we view this as a new application.
That is correct.
Yes.
That is correct. This is a new project. While we appreciate all that, we would like to ask for a vote tonight. We're not interested. We are not asking for this to be tabled. We would like a vote. Okay. So we'd like someone to make a motion for this one this evening.
Okay.
I mean, we're not required to make a motion and vote. I mean,
no, we're not.
We're not.
Okay. I guess I would.
I don't think that's correct. If we would like a decision this evening, a motion will need to be made, whether it's favorable or unfavorable. The applicant doesn't have to agree to table the motion.
I believe the commission has 45 days to make a decision. When an applicant is asked to come back, it usually means that they would like to have they would provide the commission the extra time, more than 45 days, if they need to revise for the next meeting.
Well, I'm just curious because there was reference by the neighbors that they seem to have not that they didn't seem to have the opportunity for, I don't know whether they would have responded any differently or whether there would have been other information that would have been of use to us. I mean, we got it, Friday?
Yeah,
Thursday. I think it came Thursday. So
Thursday,
I don't know
yeah.
when it came to anybody else.
Sure.
In the previous iterations.
If you could let him finish, please.
In the previous iterations of this, there was more time only because it came back, and there was a lot more discussion in the periods in between. And I agree with Diane that this is theoretically, those don't matter anymore, or those don't exist except in whatever's left in our brains. So I think it's really problematic to be making this kind of decision here. And if there is 45, I don't know when the 45-day clock begins. That's why I'm asking you that now.
All right, let me just check something.
Well, we can move to not issue a certificate of appropriateness. We can't?
No, I mean, that's like,
I mean, I
Just like
don't know
the
about other
previous one,
people,
then
but
can
I
Mark
would
comment that,
prefer.
or Scott comment on that?
I mean, are we interested in seeing? I mean, do we think that it might be productive to see modifications to the plan? I mean,
well, I don't think it's the point.
But not if the client and the applicant aren't interested in that.
Right. Well, no, I'm not saying they have to do it, but I'm saying, do we feel that we might be in? I mean, I think probably everybody felt there were some things about it that needed to be changed.
Right.
So then I guess the question is this a project where we feel that it might be productive for them to modify the plan and it's worth their time? I mean, they can always not do it, but just, I guess that's a question for us, if we feel that's worthwhile to ask them to do that.
Well, that
then why don't you could-
just gets to the issue that we were
Well, then why don't you
talking about.
suggest a motion with those, and then we'll vote?
Let's hold off because this person back here wants to speak. Gary, what was it you were going to say? You were standing there? All right. Can you please come up? If you can introduce yourself and please sign in here.
Whenever you're ready.
Just a second.
Okay, Scott has the ordinance up here, so if we can entertain a motion on this, and it'll either be an approval or a denial, and then it goes from there. So,
Should we let this woman speak?
yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm Jackie Criffield. I'm at 911 and 900. Very quickly, I just want to say a lot has been made about the design, the contemporary design, and I don't think that's an issue for actually anybody on the street, or I'm speaking for myself. It's a beautiful design. Who wouldn't want to live there? But it is enormous. And I just have to address the point of when someone said that this is what somebody would want to put here, that no one would want to put a house like what's already on the street. And the developer that tore down the two lots on that street, he indeed did have two beautiful designs of a little bit more traditional style homes for that lot. They were not as massive. They did not consume the entire lot. They did not push back beyond the neighbors. They did not restrict other neighbors' views of the lake. They were extremely appropriate for the lot. One, the guy left town, and the other one, something happened. But he did have two architectural, beautiful house designs of large homes on that property. So this is not the only thing that can go there. Thank you.
Thank you.
They were approved by the council.
Yes, thank you. Okay.
I mean, I don't know, Scott, it looks like we have three choices under the ordinance. We have the choice on our own to extend one time without the applicant's permission under under 1. And then we have the right.
Why?
We can move to approve and vote on it, or we can move to disapprove and then make recommendations. So I think we have you agree we have the choice of all three of those, Scott?
I was referencing 288, certificates of appropriateness C, reviewed by the commission. 1, it states commission shall review the application and vote to issue or deny the application within 45 days following receipt of the application. The time to consider the application may be extended with the consent of the applicant, and then goes on from there. So I think at least in that section, the consent of the applicant is the language there that I think we would seek.
We haven't had it for 40, well, whatever. We haven't had it for 45 days, have we?
But we'd probably, whether or not July 10th makes that.
That's the question.
Yeah.
I just don't know what the extension affords us if the applicant doesn't want to make changes.
If I could make a suggestion, having been in this position before with other larger clients who've come to this body, I would recommend and it seems that you're probably not unanimously or largely in favor of approving this, the motion should be to deny it and make your recommendations for consideration by the owner. The owner does not give consent to table this or to extend it.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the last part? You're saying that if there's a motion.
Can you speak up?
Yeah.
Lean up a little bit.
Yeah.
That if there's a motion and it's denied, what was your last sentence on that?
As Scott noted and as Tim just mentioned, you can make suggestions or recommendations for it when it were to come back. But to be clear, this particular application, while this project is entirely new and not a rehashing of ones that we've seen before, it is a third, I believe, perhaps fourth continuation of the same application for the same site, for the same general program.
It's much many
Not
more
the same
than that.
application.
It's not the same
Right.
application.
So
no.
I think this project has run its course. The commission in various iterations has given a great deal of input on this project, and a lot of it has been taken into consideration. So we respectfully ask for a vote.
I would disagree with you on the latter point because I think this is functionally a new application for many of
I would
the
agree with
folks
that.
on this body. So I think the idea that everyone has necessarily the same background that some of us do, and I think some of us were trying to look at this from a fresh perspective. So I'm not sure I necessarily agree with that. So
Also not.
That's appreciated, but
And
it's
I may
still
be wrong about
continued
this.
for several
I understand.
years to be exact.
Carlos, I'm not sure that the previous two were actually turned out, were they?
No,
It was always continued.
It was always
They were continued. So
yeah.
your implication is, Gary, that this commission rejected two prior schemes,
No,
but in fact they didn't.
it was tabled with recommendations to make alterations to the
Okay.
project.
And I'm not sure that the second one, and I don't remember what happened on the first one, ever actually returned. And I thought there was the issue of the extra land on number 2. Wasn't that the case, Fred?
Third.
Oh, that was the third that we never saw. Okay.
Right.
And at that point, it went before 3 members who gave some feedback and didn't come before the full body, I think.
I'm not sure about that.
Never made it that far.
No. Because we haven't been doing that for a while. So,
All bad procedure.
okay. So, a motion.
I move.
And just so you know, it's standards for construction, and there are a couple that I think don't necessarily apply that are in here. I had 12, 15, and 17 do not apply.
I'm not sure about 15 either.
I said,
13, I'm sorry, 13.
that's usually a catch-all in most things, so, but does everyone agree on that those three do not apply?
I think 17 was never even listed.
Correct. That's correct.
Right.
That 1 through
Right.
16.
Right, you're right.
So 1
I
through
will
11 and
concur
16.
with the chair about those that do
Yeah,
not apply. It
15
was
and-
a
15
oversight
and-
on my part.
Yeah, 15 and 12 do not apply.
Right.
Okay. Are we ready to
15 and
entertain?
Which do not apply?
Yeah.
I move that we issue a certificate of appropriateness for the project at 917 Edgemere Court, in that the standards for construction 1 through 11,
Yeah.
13, 14, and 16 have been met.
Correct. Is there a second?
Second.
Robert? All in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed?
Aye.
Any abstentions? Nope. Okay.
We would like a listing of which standards the commissioners believe this project does not meet, as it will be appealed to City Council at this point.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you.
Make sure that you get that. Okay, moving along. We have the approval of the meeting minutes of May 8th.
Thank you, Diane, for reading them and editing them.
No.
I was in a meeting and I suddenly looked at my email and there
No
was another
problem.
version.
I move to approve the meeting minutes for May 8th
As corrected.
as corrected.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. Next, committee reports, and we had the rules and procedures update. Did everybody have a chance to take a look at those and have any questions on that?
Well,
No, that's
No, that's just-
next. That's,
this
or
is the
it's
one
in,
with
under
the-
the staff reports.
This was the one with engineering's few comments.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that made sense what she was speaking of.
Okay,
It defines the exterior.
Yeah.
okay. Any other comments on that one?
No.
Carlos, I sent you that email about those items. Are those supposed to be played?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't have the opportunity to look into it, but there's, I think, two sections in the list in the matrix. I think it was 24 to 26 that appear to be blank.
Yeah.
And the question is that correct? And I couldn't.
No, I think those were things that we combined and deleted.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is
'cause
that? I'm sorry.
In the matrix that's in there,
Oh.
there are items that were there that were parts of rows that were deleted because there were a number of things that we actually
Right.
combined as part of that process.
So in the final version of this, those will be renumbered.
Yeah, those should be,
renumbered.
it should be renumbered,
Right.
and those lines should be deleted. And
Right.
also, I see 40 was another one that was combined. There are a couple of other ones, so you may want to check that and renumber those.
Okay.
So. Any other comments about any of the additions to that? Where's the?
So where does it stand in terms of overall approval now?
What, the rules and procedures?
Yeah.
Well, if everybody's okay with it, we'll approve it tonight. But that's why it's kind of like any other things, if you want to, Because this has been through the legal department's reviewed the additional section on that and then all of the other info there, so. One of the things that came up, and this regards actually, just to give you a little background on the temporary meeting chair, this sort of came up because I'm going to be gone for the November meeting, and Ken may be at the hospital. So with a new baby, so we'll need to, there's a likelihood we'll need to have a temporary chair there. And you know what? It's a good thing to be able to address that issue anyway. So Mark, keep that November meeting date open, okay? And then the other stuff really had to do with that memo that we talked about last week, or last time rather, so. So with that, are we ready to accept and approve the rules and procedures update? Someone want to make a motion?
I so move.
He's not even going to say what he's...
You're not even going to verbalize?
Come on, Robert.
He's just been wanting to say it that way.
Can we get a second on that one?
Yes.
Okay, thanks, Mark. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, that's done. Next, we're on to
Volunteers?
Anything from you guys?
Anything.
You guys are waiting for this grid to be approved. That was the last time.
The grid.
Yeah.
The grid with the missing line.
Right. Okay. Carlos, you want to talk about the staff reports, or your reports that you have identified as staff reports?
So, as I guess information to the commission, Commissioner Idle has been reappointed for a second term, and so congratulations for another 3-year term.
What were you thinking?
And then we have the zoning ordinance text amendment. I'd like to defer that to Scott.
Yeah, Scott, you want to talk a little bit about that one?
Sure. So with this was a referral from the City Council, a referral to the Plan Commission to make changes to the zoning ordinance, so a text amendment to the zoning ordinance, dealing with the portion of the zoning ordinance that deals with referrals to the Preservation Commission for recommendation, as we discussed earlier this evening on a couple of the items. So currently all variations and special uses are referred to the Preservation Commission for recommendation when they're in a deal with a landmark or within a district. The intent of the referral was that there are some items that the Preservation Commission allows or delegates staff to make to approve certificates of appropriateness for. So for those items, the referral was intended that those items would not come before the Preservation Commission for recommendation of the zoning variance or the fence variance, because the Commission would normally not see those items as within their within your rules and procedures have delegated staff the ability to issue certificates of appropriateness. So, for example, something, and I'm 100%, but I think this is in your rules. But if there's a patio or something in the rear and it's just paving area, let's say that's something that staff could issue the certificate of appropriateness for, but that patio would increase the lot coverage, from 28 to 31%. It would require a variance. The intent of the referral was that instead of that coming before preservation only for recommendation on the variation where it normally would not, just for the work itself, that instead would not come before preservation. And so staff would have the ability to incorporate staff's viewpoint into any kind of variation that would go before either the zoning administrator or the zoning board of appeals, depending on those. So the way the zoning ordinance is worded, really the changes, and those are included in the memo, and this was referred to the Plan Commission, so it's on their agenda for tomorrow night, actually, to consider these changes. Fence variation is the only item that's really a separate and distinct type of variation within the zoning ordinance, and those are fences are items in the rules that that staff has the ability to issue certificates of appropriateness for. So the substantive changes, because we also took out the reference to the 1975 preservation ordinance, which seemed about time for that. So the substantive change was to essentially delineate the certain types of variations and not include fences in those types of variations that would be referred to the Preservation Commission for recommendation, and then additionally to state in there that items that are excluded from the recommendation of the Preservation Commission are items where the certificate of appropriateness may be approved by staff as set forth in the ordinance, Preservation Ordinance, and the Preservation Commission's rules and procedures.
And I assume that, since there's always sort of the staff prerogative to refer it to the commission if they feel that it's necessary, that still would be fine. I assume that's part of the deal, correct?
I think so, yeah. If whatever is covered in your rules, so it certainly still leaves that authority within the Preservation Commission's rules as far as what items are staff approval with the certificates of appropriateness and which are not.
Okay.
So this is an item, it's a staff report. There's not a formal role for the Preservation Commission to recommend to the Plan Commission, but the Plan Commission will be discussing tomorrow night, so if there's any feedback or input, I can certainly bring that to the Plan Commission tomorrow night.
Did anyone have anything that they want to suggest to Scott on this? I thought it was pretty straightforward myself, so. Okay. There you go.
All right, thank you.
Just two other quick things that I wanted to mention. These are more general preservation thing. The Landmarks Illinois annual meeting is on the night of June 25th. And then the other thing that is really pretty exciting, and I think that I mentioned this to Scott and Carlos when Governor Rauner signed the budget a week or so ago. As part of that, there is now a state historic tax credit, which is really just such great news. And I think there are going to be some, just based on the criteria, I think there are some opportunities for some things here in Evanston as well as statewide to happen. And there are some criteria associated with it, but it's really very exciting because, frankly, we've been at a disadvantage for many years in terms of reuse projects. So, any other things that people want to bring up? Folks want to share? Okay, with that, can we get a motion to adjourn? What?
I second. Yeah, and I second.
Who's Tim second? All in favor signify by saying aye. 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 All right. Any opposed? I hope not. Any abstentions?